Welcome all of you to the Family Business Conference at the World Investment Forum. This is the second day of our conference and the second session. And we're today going to really get into the heart of the matter of what family businesses are all about, the next generation and next generation legacies. And we have today a great panel to discuss that with two leading academics and experts, Sabine Rau, Professor Rau, and Peter Jaskiewicz. Both were actually born into family businesses themselves and have developed a passion and an expertise around family business with that heritage. And we also have two members of leading families of our network, our family business network, Patricia Saputo from Canada. So a very good morning to you, joining very early from Canada. And Willem Aminoff, a member of the next generation of the Aminoff family in Finland. And it's a pleasure to have this great, inspiring, leading panel to take us through what it takes today to be a member of a next gen, to be a member of a family business family, to be a next gen, and to build legacies across generations. When Professor Rau and Professor Jaskiewicz, when Sabine and Peter approached me about their book, the timing couldn't be better for us. The Family Business Network, our network, was going to celebrate its 20th anniversary of the Next Gen community. Our Next Gen community is a group of 6,000 young, dedicated members in more than 60 countries. And we know that in today's world, the next generation has the capacity to shape their family business and make an impact. And we know that they want to make an impact. They want to have a purpose. And that collective impact can be actually huge and make a huge difference. Indeed, worldwide, family businesses account for 2/3 of businesses, employ 60% of the workforce, and represent and contribute over 70% of global GDP. And that predominance is actually a lot of responsibility to family businesses to accompany the transformation of capitalism toward a more responsible capitalism and to be a force for good. At FBN, we can say that we challenge the freedman shareholder-only model of business, and we've been doing that for years and decades. We do commit to champion a business model that will enable flourishing for people, for communities, and for the environment and generations to come. And this is why we have established this first-of-a-kind partnership with the UN and UNTAD, and developed the initiative called Family Business for Sustainable Development. We have an ambitious package of deliverables aiming at mobilizing business families to really embed sustainability, not only in the strategy, but in their operations. And more importantly, track their progress, measure their impact, and report transparently. And that journey of transparency is so important for us business families. For decades, for generations, we've been hidden, we've been happy, as we say in French, vivons cachés, vivons heureux. But it's time for us to come out of the closet and tell our stories in a confident yet humble way, because we don't have all the solutions. And this is why the launch of the book, Next Gen Legacies, Building Next Gen Legacies, is so important, because this is part of this movement of telling our stories and providing best practices to families on how to build more resilient businesses across generations. This fits perfectly the theme of the World Investment Conference, the World Investment Forum, which is to build investment into a more sustainable legacy. So I want to thank again Peter and Sabine for partnering with us to leverage this great book, which is much more than a book. It's actually a guide for next gen and business families to ask the relevant question and provide concrete tips on how to tackle difficult issues that next gens face daily, and find their own place, their own legacy in their family businesses. So we understand that business is a marathon, not a sprint. And when we bring together the expertise of the enterprise and the soul of the family, we can build those value-based businesses across generation and bring a more inclusive growth and better manage risk and foster resilience. So thank you all for being with us. And now it's my great pleasure to pass on the word to Professor Jaskiewicz. Thank you, Peter, for waking up so early as you're based in Canada at the Tefler School, and looking forward to a great conversation with you and the panel.
Thank you so much, Alexis. Thanks for the kind introduction and your kind words. It's a pleasure to be here. So thank you for FBN who are co-hosting the session. And thanks to everyone else who's here. First of all, to the panelists and Sabine. Sabine and I will be guiding you through the session. And also, I think, good evening, good day, or good morning to everyone else who is out there. So let's get started right away. After a brief introduction, we'll get started right away. My name is Peter Jaskiewicz. I'm a professor of family business at the Telfer School of Management at the University of Ottawa. And with Sabine, we are the authors of the book Enabling Next Generation Legacies. And today we also not have here members of the next generation on the panel, but also two of the contributors to the book. And we're excited to discuss with them how to enable next generation legacies. And with that being said, I'll be happy to pass on to Sabine to introduce herself.
A warm welcome from my side as well. Happy to be here. And just to give you a little background, I've been doing research and teaching in the family business field for quite some years. Apart from that, I'm helping families to co-create their constitutions, to develop a good idea of succession, and also to help the next generation to become responsible and competent owners, which we all need if we want these family businesses to go into a good future. So I'm very happy to be part of this panel. And Peter, I hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Sabine. So I think we are ready to get started. Patricia, I would like to start with you. And my first question is, please tell us who you are and how do you make a difference to the next generation of enterprising families?
Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening. Patricia Saputo is my name, and I'm third generation within the Saputo family. It's a family that immigrated from Sicily back in 1950s to Canada after World War II, having, I guess, issues and looking for a better way of life for the family. Fast forward to 97, the company went public. My background is I'm a CPA tax specialist, working at Deloitte at the time, and I could not continue working there if I was to accept the board position, as Deloitte audited Saputo Inc. And with the conflict of interest, I needed to either decide to stay at Deloitte or leave. My father told me that it was probably better that I left and accepted the board position, as he wanted to have a family member within his own immediate family be on the board to represent his interest. So that was the decision that was made. And what I started doing in 98, which the word and the terminology family office did not exist back then, is basically I pioneered in the family office space and took care of what began as the compliance side, the tax and accounting work for my immediate family members, because the family is very, very large. So I have to speak about my immediate family being my parents, sisters, now husbands and children. And that started me in a new direction in the family office space, where it did begin on the compliance, and then eventually as dividends were paid out of the family operating business, then it was about what we know in family offices today as being the investment arm. But I soon realized that there was more to it than just the financial capital, that we were family members, we were growing up, we were getting married, we were having children. And it's like, okay, wait a minute, but what about the human capital? What about the part that nobody talks about? The most important part of what makes an enterprising family business, the family part of the family business, come to light? And how do we help the next generation assume certain roles, within the space of the family business, the family ownership? And there were so many questions that I had. So that led me to a very different direction. It wasn't about the accounting and the tax and the investments. It was about who's out there that's working in this area. And, that's when I tried at the university of Concordia to start a program. And that's when I first met Peter. And, you know, it was developing something out there to help the family members understand what direction that they have to take. I mean, that eventually led me to where I am trying to make a difference for the next generation. And it's, you know, the founding of Chrysalia, which is really about the human capital within families. And we call it being the Chief Learning and Development Officer. So the CLDO, so new C-suite of service. So everybody hires their chief financial officer, their chief investment officer, their chief executive officer, or chief emotional officer. I mean, there's a C-suite of service that is being provided to families. But we realize that the chief learning and development officer is just as important because it really looks at a different asset, the family members, and where we should put on the balance sheet the different talent that the family members have and how that talent it will be used, whether it's in the operating business or whether it's in the family office or whether it's doing something completely different in the philanthropic side or anything that the family members see that they can make a difference in. So it's truly about knowing thyself, knowing others, and knowing the context that they live in, to really make a difference and be adaptive in their capacity to act in all the different areas of, you know, that their life leads them to. And I think it's an important area that we really have to concentrate on because it's one that I don't see many people doing so. So that's my contribution.
Thank you, Patricia. I think you make a great point. I think we're all here in the space to help next gens and enterprising families. And I'm also very glad that you have joined our initiative and our work here at the Telfer School of Management, where Sabine is also associated with, and where we're trying to build knowledge leadership, offer a safe space and a training ground. Thank you.
So I turn to you, Willem, and ask you as well, please, could you introduce yourself briefly, and then again, how do you make a difference to the next generation of your enterprising family?
Right, so my name is Wilhelm Aminoff. I'm a member of the 5th generation of what I like to consider quite a prominent business family in Finland. Our so-called cousin companies are involved in 4 types of businesses: technical trade, technology, real estate, and asset management. And I've recently graduated with a bachelor's degree in politics, economics, and philosophy, and I'm currently pursuing a law degree. And I'm otherwise also quite actively engaged in the world of family business. And so I think the way I make a difference to the next generation, of which I am a part, of course, is that I currently act as its chairman. And as chairman, I'm currently actively involved in running a sort of structured development plan we've made to actually help our next gens develop into responsible owners. And there's a lot of stuff to sort of plan and discuss surrounding this development plan. So we have regular meetings, which I chair and set the agenda for. And I also have regular meetings with the chairman of the Now Gens, where we sort of touch base and I update them on what we're doing and they let me know what they're doing as well. And essentially the way this development plan works is that we've created a sort of next gen scorecard where we've listed and categorized what we feel are like the essential traits of a responsible owner. And the idea is sort of that each year, next gens would make annual plans where they try to fill their scorecard by actually doing some of the stuff on it. And apart from this, we also have yearly business simulations, which are really fun. And we invite people in for guest talks and we pursue certificates and we do a bunch of other stuff towards the goal of becoming responsible owners. And I think as chairman, that's sort of my main role in contributing to my generation.
Thank you, Willem. It's really interesting because looking back, being another generation, developing responsible owners wasn't a key question in my business family back then, but it really changed because we realized that we not only have to develop the only one leader, so support the strongest, but we have to support all family business members of the next generation to develop to their full potential. So thank you for that contribution, Willem.
Moving on to the second round of questions, I just realized, also based on the answers of our two panelists, who have also been contributors to the book, that all of this started when Sabine and I have over the last years interviewed more than 100 next generation members and roughly 150 business families, that they had many unanswered questions and that many of them did things really well, or some didn't know how to do things. And the one thing that was common is they asked a lot of questions. And that led to our idea to actually develop a book that answers the most pressing questions of the next generation. And we actually asked for feedback from over 70 members after we assembled the first list. And yeah, that is the outcome of this. The book is the outcome of that exercise. We're not only asking the 35 most pressing questions, but got most of the leading academic practitioners out there to write chapters and an amazing enterprising families out there to comment on them. And the panelists here are two of the contributors who provided great commentaries. And this brings us right away to the second question. Patricia, for the book Enabling Next Generation Legacies, you responded with actually the next generation, so to speak, with the next generation to the following question: how do I talk to friends and colleagues about our wealth and our business worth? Can you tell us a bit more about why you believe that many next gen members around the world are concerned about this question and how your answer might help them?
Sure. So this is really interesting because I did ask for the contribution of my sons. I have three boys. And I brought this question forward during the holidays. So it would have been between Christmas, New Year's of 2020 going into 2021. And what it was, it made me realize it's not about the question itself or the answer, but in the process of getting to the answer. And just during, holiday time, being together, we were up north, just spending quality time together. And at dinner, I had asked him the question and I said, can you help me with this answer? And it was having an intentional conversation with my boys and trying to understand what did it mean to them too, and how were they talking about wealth with their friends and colleagues, and what were the concerns that they were having. And it really created a robust conversation around something that I never thought to ask, but then realized intentional conversations are really important. So in getting to the answer, I also got to explain a little bit about myself and my growing up to my sons, who never asked, and I never thought to tell them, but yet it did allow me to make them understand that I viewed, the talking about it, a difference between talking about the family part versus the Inc. And I always say there's the family and there's the Inc. The Inc. is the operating business that I'm no longer part of. I was on the board for over 20 years, and then they had this transition. So I'm not part of the operations because I'm in the family office side. So the Inc. is a different animal. I mean, it's a public company traded on the stock exchange. It has its own formal governance and, it runs on its own. The family, on the other hand, well, that's the part that I have an input in. It's also the difference between, the private side, you can be low key, on the family office side versus on the public side, public, the reputation, families and what they do. It's all very important. There's the involvement on the day-to-day on the family office and no daily involvement on the public company side. So it was really about telling my kids that it was important because my name is eponymous to the family business. I had to really be careful as to what I did because it would affect the family business or could affect the family business if you're not seen to be reputable or you're not seen to be transparent or whatever it was I was doing in my life. But then I also told them that I felt that people just assumed they knew who I was because once they knew who Saputo Inc. was, and it was great at branding and quality of its cheese products and whatnot, that they just assumed they knew me. And I would tell people, it's like, no, that's not who I am. I'm a professional. This is what I do. And it was really about explaining to them. So my kids was like, oh yeah, like, is that where, is that how your life, kind of like, treated you or went through? And I said, yes. I go, you have to be comfortable with who you are as a person and not be afraid to tell people, no, that's not me. Like, I'm not the cheese maker. I'm not a farmer. Everybody just assumes I know about farming. I know nothing about farming. So they just assume they know things about you, and you just have to say, no, that's not me. This is who I am. But there's a lot of, I guess, next generation. So when I look at my children G4, and this is great because I'm G3, my children are G4, Wilhelm is G5, that, you know, as you get to the next generations, they kind of feel like, no, they're supposed to be a certain person, but they're not. So when they talk about wealth, for me, it's one thing because I've been able to manage that wealth over the years. And my kids, it's like they're in their 20s, young 20s. So they're not quite sure. So they say, well, most people just don't bring it up for bringing it up. But when they get into conversations with their friends and they ask them, you know, well, what is it like, you know, to be wealthy, and what's it like to be? And they go, well, it's not something you kind of think about every day. It's just something that's there. And they don't even talk about if there's nothing to gain from the conversation. So they just, you know, kind of brush it off, unless they have, again, intentional conversations with their friends that are asking a specific question, then they'll engage. Or else, even at that, you just don't engage about wealth, or people are just not sure how to speak about that wealth. So during the holidays, we actually took the time to, you know, have that conversation. And if it were to come up at work or with friends or with family or with whomever, you know, how would they answer? And it kind of, you know, opened up a door to see something in a different light. And why I'm very curious about the other 34 questions, because it'll give us more conversations to have around the other questions and be intentional about those answers, or just trying to, you know, go through them in a way that I did with the question that we were answering in the book.
Thank you, Patricia. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's it. That's all I have to say.
I think you made a great point, and that's why I'm getting so excited, because that's exactly what the book is for. The book is actually a starter for discussions, and both the chapters and the commentaries are very succinct, just to bring the key points out and follow up by a list of questions that can help to further the discussion that people might lead with the next generation, with the now generation, with the senior generation, with the extended group of friends and stakeholders. So that's exactly, it's just a way to engage and start a discussion about 35 important topics. Thank you.
So we turn to you again, Willem, and to the question that you responded to for our book in Enabling Next Generation Legacies. And the question was, it is difficult to imagine that we can become responsible business owners one day. What type of development path can we pursue to learn more about becoming responsible owners? And so the question would be, can you tell a bit more about why you believe that many next gens are concerned about becoming responsible owners, and how your answers might help them to do so?
Absolutely. And I think this question really goes to the heart of what it is to be a next gen member. I mean, sort of the core characteristic of being a next gen is that you're next, and you don't currently have a sort of leading control over the business, and maybe you don't even know how to run a business. And one day you're faced with this sort of opportunity, but also this responsibility. And as such, I think that this is a question that very naturally occupies the mind of every next gen member at one point or other. And I know in my own life for a long time, I was aware of the businesses. You know, it was I always talked about at family gatherings. My mother attended meetings, but I couldn't help but notice that I myself was very concerned with literature and, you know, hanging out with my friends and doing my, you know, studying in school and politics. And sort of the question of at which point I start to accumulate this knowledge and experience necessary to run the businesses was sort of pressing on my mind for a long time. And one answer that came for me, and the answer that my cousins and I expressed in the book, is that you can actually sit down with your family and think about this question together and create a sort of structured plan in order to answer it. I think that it's something that needs to be talked about a lot more in families. You know, how can we actually pursue a development path to become responsible owners? And I think once you take that step of sitting down with your family and sort of discussing it and creating a plan, and actually identifying sort of important characteristics, good work experiences, creating maybe a bit of a timeline. I think it brings a tremendous amount of clarity, and it is a really useful exercise to do. And I think that, so in my answer in the book, I try to really suggest this idea of just sitting down and actually thinking about the question explicitly together with your family and identifying what you value in a person, a board member, and a family member, and making a plan for that.
Thank you. That's great, because it's really at the heart of what the book is about. It's about your generation and to enable your generation to really take over. And yes, you are next. That means it's the future is yours. And that is the hope of my generation, by the way.
Yeah, I like that analogy. I mean, it's, at some point of time, you'll be now, right? Generation, that would be the next step. Now that we have warmed up here on the panel and are good going, and we're moving to the third and last round of questions, I would also like to engage the audience more directly. The second part of our session will enable the direct communication, obviously, with the panelists, with us. So we encourage you to share your questions, comments in the chat. We'll pick some of them to engage with our panelists and see what they have to say. So please don't hesitate to share your thoughts and questions with us. And yeah, in a few minutes, we'll be there. Moving on, Patricia, to the third and final question. So we've talked a bit about you, your background, what you are doing for the next generation. We've talked about the book chapter, but you've already mentioned, that there is more out there. And so the third and final question is, please share with us and our audience the key 3 suggestions that you believe, can empower next gens and enterprising families. What are the 3 things that you would like everyone in the audience and us to take home, and maybe it will make a small dent to the universe?
Yes, so I will start with wealth and wellness, because in a family, it's all about their wellness first and foremost. The wealth is only helps provide for. So when we look at our wellness, I talk about happiness, where it comes from your life having meaning. And to find meaning, it's about looking for where your passion lies. And passion always comes from a time when you had a curiosity about something. So what were you curious about that you find passion in, that you want to know more about? So that leads you then to living a life that is more purposeful, so that it does full circle, because then once you feel fulfilled and happy, well, you go back to life having meaning, because with meaning, you have a passion, you live purposefully, you go back to happiness. So it really does that full cycle. And I truly believe that it is finding where your place is within the family, so that you can find that true happiness that brings that wellness. Because the weakest link in any family, the most difficulty, is with that one person that hasn't found their bearings, and they're the ones that bring the family down. And if you can help bring that family member up, then it brings happiness to everybody. But that one family member who's not finding their way is the unhappy one that then, sets the pace and the temperature for the rest of the family. So those would be the 3 things: the happiness, the passion, and purpose.
Really like that, and that very much aligns with what we found. I mean, our book starts with a chapter basically with the questions on family, because we realized that everything we heard from Next Gens was, first of all, to be comfortable and understand other family members, know how to deal with them before any other discussion is possible. So very similar to what you said, taking the time to engage, or what both partners actually said, with family members, and being able to have a good discussion, to think through things. And you're right, that wealth, wellness, meaning and passion are incredibly important. Thank you.
Yes. So again, I turn to you, Willem, and can you share with our audience your 3 key suggestions how to empower your generation, so the next generation in enterprising families?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think maybe the first thing that came to my mind would be to make it exciting. I think that one thing that really galvanized my generation about participating in the businesses was the realization that there are unsolved questions, there are trajectories and dynamics, and there are sort of ways in which we could really contribute or change things. There are really important questions we could address about what kind of company we want to be, what is our identity, and just the realization that with the passing of the flame, there is a massive opportunity to really to do interesting and cool things with the companies. It's not so much that we're inheriting a sort of set responsibility and our job is just to do our very best to maintain things as they were, but rather that we have this tremendous opportunity to actually do something quite fun and quite interesting. And I think sort of related to this would be my second suggestion, which is to make it about impact. I think that another thing that has been really important for my generation in becoming excited about the businesses is that we are living in a time of sort of tremendous social transformations. We have really big questions such as climate change, and really the idea of what a business does is sort of shifting, or maybe even has already shifted from just a vehicle for generating profit to a vehicle that can also generate positive social outcomes. And I think that realization and sort of emphasizing that has been really helpful in making my generation feel passionate about the business, because it also involves people who don't necessarily have a business background or weren't necessarily intending to work with business their whole lives. Suddenly they have another avenue with which they can enter into sort of interest in the businesses. Sorry. And thirdly, I would suggest making a development plan. So sorry. Right, so the last thing I would suggest is that one way that we've really empowered our next generation, and I don't mean to come off as Mr. Development Plan here, but I do think that making a development plan has been tremendously empowering for us, because you might think the businesses are exciting, you might think they're a great opportunity to make an impact, but it's not always clear how we get there. And maybe it might feel a little overwhelming, or like a sort of lofty, faraway goal. And actually sitting down and talking about a sort of plan with which we could get to that stage, have the skills, the experience, and the knowledge to actually do something exciting with the business without sort of running them down, or make an impact with the business, I think has been really empowering. So to summarize, I'd say make it exciting, make it about impact, and make a plan for how you get there.
Thank you, Willem. Those are very good points. And to add to the exciting and impact, I think the plan is also a chance to engage the now gen about the excitement and the impact, because don't forget, as next gens, you want to make an impact. That means change. And some of my generation are a little bit scared by then. And so you have to make this plan in order to not only give the next generation some guidelines, but also to make sure that the now generation understands what you want to do, where you want to move to, and how you will move there. So they develop the trust that the next gen will be able at some point in time to take over, because if they block you, your generation will not be in charge and they will not be able to make the impact. And we need the impact you will be making. May I just, as the next question, take one to both of you, Patricia and Willem, and maybe Willem, you can start. Dominic Ottenpapas asked, what would be the right age to start such conversations? And as you are closer to that age when it started, Willem, maybe you can share your experience with that.
Thanks so much. I hope you don't mind this ringing in the background. I am being positively thrown out of my hotel room right now. But basically, I'd say that the right age is probably different for every family. Every family has a different culture. Every family starts talking about the businesses earlier. during different generational structures. Maybe it's more or less important to start talking about it earlier. But for me, I think it was quite nice to be, I don't want to use the word shielded, but, to grow up having a tremendous freedom with what I want to do with my life, thinking I want to be an author, or perhaps I want to be a historian, and not really engaging too much with the world of family business. And then once I started entering my sort of working adult life, that coincided quite nicely with actually being involved in the businesses. At that stage of my life, I'm anyway, I'm making a LinkedIn, I'm creating connections, I'm doing all the things that sort of are quite in line with discussing the businesses more and being more involved with them. So for me, I think that having discussions is maybe good earlier, but taking more serious steps like starting a development plan, having some sort of expectations, accountability, expecting work from next gens, I would say is perhaps most appropriate as they start to enter their sort of maybe early 20s, as they start going to university, as they enter their sort of adult working life. I think that's a good time to start being more serious about it. But I do think that, it's always good to talk about stuff, but maybe, taking your 13-year-old child to the side and, having a serious conversation about their position as a next gen might be a bit premature. So.
Thank you, Willem. Yes, and you mentioned it in a way, it's also a question of how to talk about it, not only when, but of course, I remember I've spent a lot of time on the site when my father took us over the weekends, and it was rather a playing ground than a factory for me. So it grew with time. But I turn it to Patricia. Patricia, what is your experience? What is the right time and how to get engaged about the questions with your children?
Yeah, so I don't in any way mean to be contradictory to Wilhelm, but I would have said 13, only because at 13, children, and I'm saying even younger than that, only because by the time 13 comes, most children already have an idea of whether their family is wealthy or not. And they've already, prior to that age, have asked, are we rich or are we wealthy? And those conversations should begin when the children are curious enough, at whatever age that is, to start asking those questions. And then I don't begin the answer with an answer, but with another question to know, well, how did this question come about? What happened? What enticed them to think about asking that question? Because at an older age, we think life, differently than when children are very young, which, they're very innocent in the way that they come around and very innocent in the questions that they ask. So not to get flustered and say, oh no, those are not the questions you ask. Because when you do that, you've just shut down the possibility of having that conversation again when they're older. Unless you bring it up, they won't, because you've reprimanded them for not bringing up that question. Whereas if you answer the question with more questions to understand in their world, was it because somebody at school said, oh, you're so lucky, you're wealthy, or you're so lucky, you went on vacation again this year. By 13, they already know the lifestyle they lead with the cars they drive, the houses they live in, the vacations they go on. It's obvious. And then they compare as they go to their friends' homes and, they're out more often. They already have an idea. And either they learn the wrong way through their environment around them, or they can learn the right way through their family telling them, what it is, how it is, and what is that dialogue you want to have. So we had started our family meetings when I think the youngest grandchild was 8 years old. And we started this back in 2013. And every year we've had them twice a year, before my parents left down south for the winter and when they came back in the spring. And we were doing that every year up until COVID, where we couldn't get together anymore. And if there's one thing that we heard from the grandchildren was, what do you mean, we're not having our family meeting again? And it came from the youngest ones, because it was part of who they grew up to being, like from 8, to 13, 14. It's like, okay, wait a minute, we're not doing this. Like, it's part of who they are. So when you have those family meetings and you have these conversations, and it's not about the wealth, it could be about anything, about the family's values. It could be about, we had meetings on, my father teaching the grandchildren how to make cheese in my kitchen. We went to visit the plant. We went, we did other things that, engages them so that they can see and be exposed to things, or just allow them to ask questions at the family. Or we even played a game. Do you know your family members? I mean, it doesn't have to be meetings about business, and you don't want them around the boardroom. You go in the kitchen and you just have, so the age really, there is no age. It's whenever they're ready to engage by the questions that they ask is when you should begin those conversations.
I really, sorry, Sabine, go ahead.
Just a quick comment, because I really like the suggestion to really put a positive thing on the question. Like, my feedback that I am giving as the now gen to the next gen is, yes, your questions are welcome. Don't shut them down. And Peter, you may go a little bit further. We have done research on sharing stories. So legacies built by shared stories among family members.
Yeah, both in our research and our work with families, actually. I mean, as we have seen pretty much the same that both of you have just said, Evelyn and Patricia. And so it's exciting. I've been smiling for the last few minutes, because maybe the biggest surprise was, first of all, to realize how many families feel uncomfortable and don't know really when to engage and how to engage. And having observed families, how they engage with each other. There are some, it doesn't matter, a bit like both of you said, right? Whether you're on the boardroom table or the dinner table or the fireplace in the evening, everyone can talk about everything. But there are others that don't allow it. There's no access to the boardroom, and please never mention the business or the enterprise in any way around the kitchen table, right? And that already means that that it's almost like a stigmatized situation. It makes it very difficult later on to create what Willem, for example, said, excitement, and talk about impact, and ensure that you can develop a plan together. Because from the get-go, it's almost like two separate lives that are led. So I couldn't agree more with what has been said. And it just shows once again how important it is to get out, engage with families, learn from those who do it well, and share it, which we with the broader audience, with all the families out there. And that's what we've tried to do in our daily work, and obviously in the book. So thank you. We have another exciting question, and that might not that might apply to some family business. I don't know whether it's applicable to the panelists here, but Alexis has asked that there's a lot of tension between generations on issues such as climate change and business practice, and how might families be able to avoid the blame and shame across generations? So I don't know, Patricia, is this a question you want to comment on?
Yeah, I'll comment on it because, I've been in touch with many families around the world, and there is the issue of some families having made their money through whether it's the dirty business. Everybody talks about oil and gas being dirty business now. I mean, Canada, it's our main resource in our western part of the country, and it doesn't mean that because you had major money through the bad way, and now you want to clean it up and do good. And there's so many conversations a family can have about what life was. And when you look at the genograms, but you really look at it in the point of view of when each generation was born, and what they were exposed to during that time versus the next generation when they were born and what they're exposed to, and try to understand where the previous generation's lives, what they were like, and the next generation, what they were like, and try to link those together by understanding why it was done that way. I mean, there was a point making cheese, and people weren't using gloves, they weren't wearing hairnets. Smoking was normal. I mean, it was just a different way, and things change with time. I guess the problem is when the family doesn't want to change and refuses to change, And you have, these conversations where, you butt heads and say, the next generation say, no, we have to move forward. We have to move into the future. Things are changing. If you don't change the business, we'll become obsolete. So those are the conversations that might be more difficult, where you might not have, the previous generations wanting to because they're afraid of change, but the next generation say, no, we have to, or we'll become obsolete and we won't exist. So we need to, and those are, tension point management. And part of what Chrysalia does is deal with tension point management between family members to find out why are they arising, what's the dialogue they're having, and trying not to get to, was it Einstein that said the definition of insanity is when you do the same thing over and over again, expect a different result. Well, what are the conversations you can have within the family that are different, that you don't end up with the same result, but change the end by changing the conversation and changing the direction of the dialogue?
I really like your response, because I was also a bit taken away by the question. We're currently conducting basically interviews with large families across Canada, and you mentioned the Canadian oil and gas sector, and we've talked to people in various sectors who have mentioned that that climate change, for example, was not a topic 50 years ago in most areas, and how much the next generation brought it to the attention of the senior generation. And in many cases, they actually work together to see how they can have impact and how they actually change the business model they're pursuing. And this has actually shown the now or the senior gens what kind of impact the next generation can have. So in many cases that where I've been involved with families, we have seen that this was an opportunity. The problems that are out there, every problem is an opportunity for positive change and impact. And it might be a difficult hurdle to tackle, but it all starts with the conversation, whether it's around the kitchen table or the boardroom table. And then in my experience, I agree with you, Patricia, right? These are all hurdles that can be taken. Many families take them proactively. Wilhelm, do you have something to add? What is your view on this point, this question?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree absolutely with everything that's been said. And I mean, I guess I could briefly add that I think one thing that's really important with this is that it shouldn't come as a surprise. I think that it's really important that the generations sort of discuss their values, both like intergenerationally and intergenerationally, so that when the next generation starts being more active in the companies, the previous generation isn't shocked by all of their, wild ideas and how they just want to come in and change everything. And I think another thing that is sort of important for this is creating trust. I think that it's very natural that the next generation might have different ideas than the previous generation. But if the previous generation feels that the next generation is well prepared and they pursued good experience and knowledge and they, have trust in them, then maybe that would help to bridge the gap. And they would feel that even though they're taking it in a different direction and maybe they disagree on some things, ultimately the next generation are responsible, they do trust them, and maybe they'll feel more okay with leaving them to take a different direction.
Great, thank you. That's really interesting, both of you, to look at that, especially the trust part, Willem. I would like to stress again, because blaming, as Alexis said, is something that destroys trust. So on the other hand, if you have a high level of trust through ongoing conversations and through exploring rather options than exchanging your point of view, you can build this trust, and then also in complicated situations build on this basis, shared values and trust. And then the trust of the now gen, that the next gen wants to change something, but not to blame them because the situation is as it is. It sounds so easy, it's hard to do. I'm turning to the next question that we've got on the chat, and it says, in your experience, is there an age at which it may be too late to engage and educate the next generations? And they are referring that to that I'm sit, many now gens may not be open to sharing information within the family or to actively engage the next generation in learning, and then they realize they have to. So when would it be too late from your point of view?
Is this to me? Yeah, so, well, obviously I like to believe that it's never too late. I mean, I think everybody is able to learn things and grow and develop, their entire lives. However, I do find that I've observed a sort of correlation between, sort of the older you start to engage the next generation and bring clarity and sort of start to activate them and help them gain education. I think that it does become more difficult. I think people do have a tendency to feel as they grow older and that they've sort of, I don't want to say missed the boat, but, I think that it is certainly best to engage next generations as early as possible. And I have noticed when I've been at different events with FBN and, within different families that there is a feeling that once people reach a certain age and they've not sort of made that big leap into gaining the important experiences and knowledge, that there is more of a threshold. So never say never. I think it's never too late to engage people, never too late to learn things and grow and develop as a person and a business owner. But that being said, I would certainly recommend engaging next gens earlier rather than later.
So it is not too late, but it becomes harder. Patricia, do you want to add something?
Yes, I'll add with a story where an 85-plus-year-old man, father, and a 60-plus-year-old daughter. Father did not want to let go of the reins of the business. The 60-year-old daughter, always said, okay, maybe one day, but in the meantime, this is what she's done throughout her career. 85-plus-year-old father says one day, okay, daughter, it's time. I think it's about time that I give up the presidency and hand over the reins to you because I won't be around forever and I'm ready now. And the daughter turns around and tells the dad, says, oh, well, wait a minute. I'm planning my retirement. I'm going to be 65 and I don't plan to be at the business till I'm 85 plus like you. I'm already getting the next generation ready. My son is coming up the ranks and maybe he's ready now to take on presidency because I don't want it anymore. So it's never too late. And as long as you know who you are and where you want to end up in life, even if the previous generation's not ready to give it up, it doesn't mean you can't still do what you need to be doing. And then preparing the next generation after that to not be in the same predicament that you were in or the previous generation was in. So there's ways of, changing that. So I absolutely agree with Wilhelm. It's never too late.
Thank you so much. That was a great story. Peter, I hand it on to you.
Thank you so much. I also enjoyed that. I believe that what we have maybe observed in many business families is there's usually a family hurdle, and that's why people don't engage. There's somebody they don't get along, or somebody who once behaved awkwardly, or maybe something happened a generation or two ago, and there's still some baggage that people carry around, and that's the reason why that is being delayed until it might be too late. So my big comment maybe here is based on working, observing business families that very often it all starts in the family and it all ends in the family, and one has to look not only whether it's too late or not, but why might it be late. And yeah, thank you so much. That was great. It makes me actually think. I took some notes. That's always wonderful. I know that we are slowly coming towards the end of the session, so I want to take a big moment here to thank Patricia and Wilhelm very much for being part of the panel, talking about their contribution to the book and about how to enable next generation legacies. Book is just a way to start a discussion and maybe develop that plan that Wilhelm has managed. I also want to very, very much thank Sabine. Sabine and I have been working for many years together, and it's exciting to continue in that path and to try to make a small dent to the universe of next gens. Similarly, I want to very much thank Alexis and FBN and the team, who have been amazing help. And And I'll switch briefly to our last slide to provide you with some more information. Because the session was together with FBN and Alexis's team and the panelists to shed some light on the book and on discussions, how to enable the next generation. There's a small picture here. If you want to find out more, please don't hesitate to go to the webpage 35questions.com. The book will be available for sale in December and will start shipping at the beginning of September. And I would also like very much to highlight to NextGen, if you want to find more about NextGen programming, to visit fbni.org. And FBN is going to celebrate its 20th anniversary of the NextGen program next year. And there will be a lot of activities. Among others, we plan together to develop a series of online panels, Next Generation Time. So stay tuned. And so it just continues the enabling and next generation legacies into the next year. And finally, for everyone else, you can stay on the stream after the session, although the live stream here will end. I invite you to stay to join the Next Gen Lombard OD award session with FBN, which will start in a few minutes. That being said, thanks everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, everybody, for a great panel.
Thanks so much.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Bye.